At 6:12 a.m., I stepped onto my front porch and saw a thick industrial padlock chained across my driveway gate like I was some kind of criminal. Hanging from it was a laminated sign that read, "Property Access Suspended by Order of Maple Ridge, HOA." Before my brain could even catch up, a tow truck rolled up slow and smug, and a woman's voice, sharp enough to cut glass, called out, "Go ahead, take it. He doesn't get to park here anymore." I just stood there with my coffee going cold in my hand because the car they were about to yank away was the only way I could get my mom to her heart appointment that morning. I moved into Maple Ridge Estates in Cedar Falls, Ohio, thinking I'd finally found peace. You know the vibe: quiet streets, trimmed lawns, those same tasteful little mailboxes lined up like soldiers. I bought the place because it was close to the hospital where my mom's cardiologist worked, and because after a rough couple of years, I needed something simple: a driveway, a roof, a little backyard where my mom could sit when she felt strong enough. I wasn't looking for drama. The problem is, Maple Ridge doesn't do simple. Maple Ridge does compliance. Maple Ridge does community standards. Maple Ridge does the kind of HOA nonsense that makes you wonder if you accidentally moved into a neighborhood run by a corporate cult. And at the center of it all was Brenda Whitaker, HOA president, self-appointed queen of everybody else's property, and the kind of woman who could turn a smile into a threat in half a second. First time I saw her, I was out front replacing a couple of rotted fence slats. Not rebuilding it, not changing the height, not painting it neon green, just swapping out the parts that were literally falling apart. I hear heels clicking on the sidewalk behind me, and there she is, blonde hair curled like she had a standing appointment to look judgmental, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Excuse me," she said, dragging the words out like she was already disappointed in me. "Are you Ethan Miller?" I wiped sweat off my forehead and nodded. "Yeah, that's me." She didn't even introduce herself first. Of course she didn't. You're making exterior modifications without submitting an architectural review request. I blinked at her. "I'm replacing broken wood. Same color, same fence." She tilted her head and smiled like I'd told a joke. "That's not how it works in Maple Ridge. The HOA is the process. The HOA is the law." I laughed a little because, honestly, what else do you do when someone talks like that? But she didn't laugh back. Her eyes flicked down to my tools, then to my driveway, then back to me like she was cataloging me for later. "You'll receive a notice," she said. "Please be more mindful." And then she walked away. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. Within 2 weeks, I had a stack of letters like I was getting fan mail from Satan. One notice said my fence paint was off-tone. Another said my trash bins were visible for an excessive duration, even though I rolled them back in the same afternoon. Another warning said I needed permission to replace exterior hardware, which I guess meant if my front doorknob broke, I was supposed to file paperwork and wait for a committee meeting like it was the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Brenda started showing up everywhere. I'd look out my kitchen window and see her on the sidewalk phone up snapping pictures toward my property. I'd come home from work and catch her peering like she was trying to find something, anything to punish. One day I walked outside and found a neon orange sticker slapped on my windshield, "Parking Violation Tow Authorized." I stood there staring at it because I wasn't even on the street. I was parked in my own driveway. I marched straight to the HOA office, which was basically a little rented room near the community pool, and asked for Brenda. She stepped out like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. "What can I do for you, Ethan?" she said. Voice, sweet eyes. Not sweet at all. I held up the sticker. "This. My car is in my driveway. That's my property." She glanced at it like it was nothing. Driveways in Maple Ridge have appearance standards. Vehicles must be parked in approved positions to preserve the look of the community. I actually laughed again, but it came out sharp. Approved positions. I pointed down the street. "It's a driveway. It's a slab of concrete attached to my house." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice like she was giving me a secret. "In this community, if it looks like shared space, it is shared space. You're new, so I'll give you some grace this time. But don't push your luck. That line, "don't push your luck," stayed in my head all night. Because it wasn't a rule, it wasn't guidance, it was a threat. I tried to be the bigger person. I did the polite emails. I asked for the exact regulation. I requested a copy of the CC&Rs like a responsible adult. I told myself maybe I'm missing something. Maybe this place has weird rules. Maybe I should just play along until things calm down. But Brenda didn't want calm. Brenda wanted control. A week later, I got an official notice. Hearing required repeated non-compliance. They wanted me at a board meeting like I was on trial. I showed up in a clean button-down carrying a folder with every notice, every email, every photo I'd taken of my own driveway, like I was building a case to prove I existed. The meeting wasn't a meeting, it was a setup. Brenda sat at the head of the table. 2 board members sat beside her, quiet, uncomfortable, like people who'd learned it was safer not to disagree. And Brenda had a slideshow. I'm not kidding, a slideshow. On a screen. Photos of my fence, my bins, my car zoomed in like crime scene evidence. She clicked through them, narrating like a documentary villain. Here, she said, tapping the screen with a pen, we see unauthorized fence repair. Here, bins visible beyond acceptable time. Here, vehicle positioned in a manner that disrupts visual uniformity. I raised my hand like a student. My car is in my driveway. That is not HOA common property. Brenda smiled wider. The HOA governs community standards. Sure, I said, trying to stay calm, but you can't tow my car off my private property. She leaned back, folded her hands, and said, if you force us to enforce, you will not enjoy the consequences. The room went quiet, and I remember thinking, okay, so we're doing mafia stuff now. I walked out of there with a sinking feeling, but I still didn't think she'd go that far. People like Brenda love power, sure, but most of them stop short of doing something that's obviously illegal. I underestimated her. The next morning was my mom's appointment. She'd been anxious all week. Her chest pains weren't constant, but they were enough that her doctor squeezed her in early. I set my alarm, made her oatmeal, helped her get ready, told her we'd be fine. I stepped outside to warm up the car, and there it was. The chain, the padlock, the sign. I stood there for a full 5 seconds with my brain lagging like an old computer because it didn't make sense. You can't just lock someone out of their own driveway. That's not a community guideline. That's insane. Then the tow truck pulled up, and Brenda's voice floated across the morning air like she owned it. "Morning, Ethan," she called. She was standing on the sidewalk in a fitted blazer at 6 in the morning like this was her Super Bowl. "You didn't comply after your hearing. Enforcement begins today." I walked toward the gate, hands up. "Brenda, my mom has a heart appointment. We need the car." She shrugged, actually shrugged like I'd said I needed to go get a latte. "Not my problem. Rules are rules." The tow guy climbed out, looking bored. He glanced at Brenda like she was the one signing his paycheck. "You want it taken?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. He's not authorized to park here." I turned to the tow guy. "This is my driveway." He gave me that look, half apology, half I don't care. "Lady says tow, I tow," he said. That was it. That was the moment something cracked in me. I wasn't just angry. I was hurt, like deep hurt. Because it wasn't about a fence anymore. This woman was using a clipboard and a contract to mess with my mother's health. My mom opened the front door behind me and asked Ethan, "What's happening?" And I hated that she heard the tremble in my voice when I said, "It's okay. We'll figure it out." I ended up calling a taxi. We were late. My mom sat in the back seat clutching her purse, breathing shallow, trying not to panic. I kept staring out the window thinking, is this real? Is this actually my life? We got to the hospital. We made it. She got seen. But when we came home, my driveway was still chained like I lived in a junkyard prison. And on my door was a new notice, access to community amenities suspended until fines paid. Like the pool mattered when I couldn't even leave my house. That night I sat at my kitchen table with all the papers spread out, and something in me just folded. I'm not proud of it, but it's true. I stared at the HOA documents, the endless paragraphs of legal language, and I felt small, like I'd walked into a system built to crush people who didn't have time, money, or energy to fight. I remember whispering to myself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some clause I missed. Maybe driveways are weird here. Maybe I should just pay whatever fine she made up, submit the stupid forms, repaint the fence, apologize, keep my head down. And then another thought hit me worse than all the others. What if she puts a lien on my house? What if she escalates until I can't afford it? What if I lose this place? I'd poured everything into this move. I did it for my mom. I did it because I promised her I'd make things easier, not harder. And now some woman with perfect curls and a clipboard was turning my front yard into a battleground. I sat there so long the kitchen light started buzzing. And for the first time, I honestly wanted to give up. Then knock, knock, knock. I almost ignored it. I wasn't in the mood for another notice, another confrontation, another human being. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Brenda. It was my neighbor Linda Parker. 60-something kind eyes cardigan, even though it wasn't that cold. She held a folder like she'd been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. "Ethan," she said softly, "I saw the chain." I tried to force a smile. "Yeah. Welcome to Maple Ridge." Linda didn't laugh. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Brenda did this to a family 2 streets over, and to an older man before that. She pushes until people pay or leave." My stomach dropped. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Linda's eyes flashed, and for the first time I saw anger in her. Because people are scared, and because she knows how to make it look official. She handed me the folder. But she's not smarter than paperwork. Here. Inside were copies of the neighborhood plat map, actual county documents, not HOA nonsense. Linda pointed with her finger. "This is your lot line," she said. "This is your driveway. Private property. The HOA doesn't own it." I stared at the lines like they were oxygen. "There's an easement," she added, "for drainage. Not for towing. Not for locking you out." My throat tightened. "How did you get this?" Linda shrugged. "I've lived here 18 years. You learn to keep records." And then she said the words I didn't realize I needed to hear. "You're not crazy. You're not wrong. She's counting on you thinking you are." That was the switch. The moment I stopped drowning and started swimming. The next morning I called the county recorder's office and requested official copies of my deed and plat. I called my title company and asked them on record to confirm the driveway was mine. I printed every HOA email Brenda ever sent me. And I started documenting everything like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. I walked outside and filmed the chain and lock zooming in on the sign. I recorded the tow truck company name from the receipt they'd left on my windshield, Iron Hook Towing. I called Iron Hook and asked why they towed from private property. The woman on the phone got real careful real fast. "We have an agreement with Maple Ridge HOA," she said. I said, "You have an agreement to trespass." She hung up. That made me curious. So I looked up public records for HOA contracts because, yes, some of that is accessible if you know where to look, and I found something that made my skin crawl. Brenda had signed an exclusive towing agreement with Iron Hook, and there was a service fee listed per tow, meaning every time someone got yanked, somebody made money. I didn't know if Brenda personally got a kickback, but I didn't need to. It smelled rotten, and rotten is enough when you're standing in front of a judge. I wrote one calm, clean email to the HOA board, not Brenda, the whole board. I kept it simple. My driveway is private property. Locking it and towing from it is unlawful. I demand immediate removal of all obstructions and cessation of towing enforcement on my lot. All future contact must be in writing. I attached the deed, the plat map, the title confirmation. I hit send. Then I waited. Brenda replied within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Her email was 3 sentences long, like she couldn't be bothered. "You are in violation. The HOA will continue enforcement. Cooperate if you want access restored." Cooperate. like she had kidnapped my driveway. That word did it. I took my folder, got in a friend's car because mine was still being held hostage by iron hook, and went straight to the courthouse to file for an emergency injunction. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a guy who fixes electrical panels for a living. But I know the difference between a rule and a crime. And locking someone out of their own property so they cooperate feels a lot like extortion with extra steps. The day I got served with the court date was the day Brenda decided to go all in. 2 days later, she showed up at my house with 2 men I'd never seen before, one holding bolt cutters, the other holding a new lock and chain, like they were installing themselves as owners of my driveway. I walked outside with my phone recording my hands, shaking, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it was rattling my ribs. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Brenda smiled, the same smile she'd worn the day she first threatened me over fence slats. "We're correcting the issue," she said. "HOA property is being improperly accessed." I held up my deed copy. "This is not HOA property." The guy with the bolt cutters stepped toward the chain like he was going to cut it, like he didn't care that my house was right there, that I was right there. I stepped between him and the gate. "Don't," I warned, voice low. "You cut anything on my property and you're trespassing. I'm calling the police." Brenda's eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped into something colder. "You're a new homeowner, Ethan. You don't get to challenge how Maple Ridge operates." I felt my face burn. "You don't get to decide whether I can leave my own house," I snapped. The bolt cutter guy hesitated. The other guy shifted like he suddenly realized this wasn't just an HOA argument. Brenda leaned in and said, "In this community, I decide who lives peacefully." That was the line, the one she probably thought was powerful, the one I was thrilled she said out loud while my phone recorded every syllable. I dialed 911 right in front of her. "What's your emergency?" the operator asked. "My HOA president is at my house with 2 men attempting to restrict access to my property," I said, forcing my voice steady. "They've previously locked my driveway and had my car towed from private property. I have documentation. I need an officer here." Brenda rolled her eyes like calling the cops was rude, like I was overreacting, like she wasn't literally trying to lock me in my own home. When the patrol car pulled up, Brenda's whole posture changed. Her shoulders lifted, her voice sweetened, her hands opened like she was an innocent, concerned citizen. "Officer," she said, "thank goodness. We have a homeowner refusing to comply with community standards." The officer looked at the chain, the bolt cutters, then at me. "Sir," I handed him the folder. Deed, plat, title letter, emails, photos, the video of the tow truck, Brenda's "cooperate if you want access" message. The officer flipped through it slow, careful, like the more he read, the less he liked what he was seeing. Finally, he looked up at Brenda. "Ma'am," he said, "this appears to be private property. You do not have legal authority to lock this driveway or tow from it." Brenda's smile twitched. "But the HOA..." "The HOA doesn't override property law," the officer cut in. "You're obstructing access and potentially trespassing." Brenda's face went tight. "We're enforcing. It's our job." The officer nodded once, then pointed at the chain. "Remove it. Now." For the first time since I moved into Maple Ridge, Brenda Whitaker looked unsure. Not scared exactly, but cornered. Like she'd spent so long barking orders, she forgot what it sounded like when someone with real authority spoke back. One of her guys started fumbling with the lock. Brenda tried one last time, voice rising desperate. "This homeowner is disruptive. He's refusing to respect the rules." I couldn't help it. I laughed, but it wasn't friendly. "The rule is, you don't get to kidnap my driveway," I said. The officer didn't even look at me when he spoke. He kept his eyes on Brenda. "If you continue this behavior," he said, "you may be cited. And if you return to restrict access again, you could be arrested for trespass." Brenda's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. And right then, like the universe wanted to pour gasoline on the moment, 2 neighbors walked up, drawn by the police car, by the shouting, by the drama. Brenda always tried to keep quiet. One of them, a guy named Mark Reynolds I'd seen at the mailbox, looked at Brenda and said loud enough for everyone, "Is this what you've been doing to people?" Brenda snapped. "This is none of your business." Mark didn't back down. "It becomes my business when there's a cop in front of Ethan's house because you're locking him in." Another neighbor, an older woman, muttered, "She did it to the Harris family too." Brenda turned toward them like she wanted to burn them with her eyes. "You're all being manipulated." Mark stepped closer. "No, Brenda. You've been manipulating everyone. And that's the part she never planned for. Karen types like Brenda thrive in private behind paperwork and emails and closed-door hearings where they can control the narrative. They hate sunlight. They hate witnesses. They hate accountability." My emergency injunction hearing was scheduled for the next day. That night, the HOA board sent an email to the whole community calling an emergency meeting. I showed up with my folder and my mom's shaky hand on my arm because she insisted on coming even though I told her she didn't have to. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. "Don't let them do this to you," she whispered. Brenda walked in like she still owned the room, but the air felt different. People weren't avoiding her gaze anymore. They were watching her, measuring her, waiting. Mark Reynolds stood up first and asked a simple question. "Did you authorize towing from Ethan's private driveway?" Brenda tried to pivot. "This is about community standards." "Yes or no," Mark said. The room went still. Brenda's cheeks flushed. "We authorized enforcement," she said. "Enforcement?" Another neighbor repeated, bitter. "You mean punishment." Then Linda Parker stood up calm as a judge. "I have lived here 18 years, she said, "and I have watched you use the HOA as a weapon. I have watched you threaten liens. I have watched you push people until they pay or until they leave." Brenda's voice went sharp. "That is absolutely false." Linda didn't blink. "Then explain your towing contract." I saw Brenda's eyes flick to the side, just a flick, but it was enough. Mark held up a printout. "Iron Hook Towing," he read. "Exclusive contract. Fee per tow." Someone in the room swore under their breath. Brenda's mouth closed, then opened again. "That is standard," she said. "That is for community safety." And that's when the board member who'd been silent for weeks finally spoke. A middle-aged guy named Stephen, who looked like he'd aged 10 years, just sitting next to Brenda. "Brenda," he said quietly, "we need to vote." Brenda stared at him like he'd betrayed her. "Excuse me, we need to vote on your removal," he repeated louder this time. The room erupted, people talking, murmuring, some nodding, some shocked, but no one defending her. Brenda tried to bang her clipboard on the table like it was a gavel. "You can't do this," she snapped. "I am the president." Mark leaned forward. "You were," he said. "The vote wasn't close, not even a little. The same people who used to keep their heads down raised their hands. The same people who used to pretend Brenda's behavior was normal finally admitted they were tired of being bullied." Brenda sat frozen as the result was read out loud. "Motion passes," Stephen said, voice shaking but firm. "Brenda Whitaker is removed as HOA president, effective immediately." Brenda's face went pale, then red, then pale again, like her emotions couldn't decide what mask to wear. She stood up so fast, her chair scraped hard against the floor. "This is a witch hunt," she hissed. The officer standing at the back of the room, yes, one was there because of course there was, stepped slightly forward, and Brenda stopped mid-rant like she'd hit an invisible wall. She looked around the room and realized there was no applause coming, no support, no fear left to harvest. Just eyes, witnesses, consequences. She grabbed her clipboard and stormed out, shoulder-stiff heels snapping against the floor, and for the first time since I moved into Maple Ridge, the air felt like it belonged to the residents again, not to her. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need a victory speech. I just walked out, drove my car home after Iron Hook suddenly decided to release it without a fight, and stared at my driveway, open, unchained mine. And the only lesson I can give you is this: bullies love rules until someone shows up with receipts.